ღონისძიება გქონდა და გვიხარია რომ ხალხი ჯერ კიდევ ჩვენთანაა. ვიწყებთ დიდი ხნის მოლოდინის შემდეგ შეხვედრას ბლეიკ კრაუჩთან. ბევრისთვის ძალიან ისეთ საყვარელ ავტორთან. მე მინდა სანამ შეხვედრას დავიწყებთ კრისტოფერ ანდერსონს ამერიკის შეერთებული შტატების საელჩოს კულტურის ატაშეს ვთხოვო სიტყვით მოგმართოს.
გამარჯობა. მე ვარ კრისტოფერ ანდერსონი, ამერიკის კულტურის ატაშე საქართველოში და ხელს იცი რომ ამერიკა და საქართველო არიან სტრატეგიული პარტნიორები, მაგრამ ეს ნიშნავს რომ ჩვენ ხარშუჯეს თავდაცვის ჩვენ გვაქვს ძლიერი და ბევრი თავდაცვის პროგრამები და ჩვენ გვაქვს ბევრი ეკონომიკური პროგრამები, მაგრამ ასევე ნიშნავს რომ ჩვენ გვაქვს ბევრი კულტურის ჩვენ ხარშუჯეს კულტური ორგანიზაცია და ფესტივალი როგორც ეს ლიტერატურის ფესტივალი. ეს არის ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანი, იმიტომ რომ ჩვენ გვინდა რომ ამერიკა და საქართველო გვაქვს კარგი ხალხური კავშირი, ძლიერი ხალხური კავშირი, ეს არის ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანი და ეს არ არის მხოლოდ დიპლომატიური კავშირი, მაგრამ ხალხური და ეს არის ჩვენ ახლა ჩვენ გვაქვს ძალიან სამართლებული წერალი და არის სამართლებული სხვა ასპექტი. პირველი გვაქვს ბევრი ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანი და საინტერესო სიგნი და ასევე გვაქვს და ეს არის მნიშვნელოვანი ამერიკაში ბევრი ფილმი და ტელევიზორი სიგნიდან, მაგრამ მე ვფიქრობ რომ ყველაზე მნიშვნელოვანი თავისი სიგნი არის ძალიან ნიჟერი. არ არის ძალიან რთული სიგნი, მაგრამ ძალიან ნიჟერი. ეს არის ძალიან საინტერესო. And so now I'd like to switch. I'd like to thank you for joining. And as I was saying in Georgian, you're a very successful author. Successful one. You've sold a lot of books. You've had a lot of your books have been turned into TV shows. But most importantly, your books, as you were saying, are written in some ways in a very simple way, but they make you think. And they have a deep impact on people's lives. I think there's someone here today who was saying that your book, Dark Matter, really helped them think differently about their life. And I think that's what we look for in literature. Literature that stays with you. And it's not just a great read, it's fun, those are great books, but I think what is really interesting is that the books you're writing tackle very interesting and deep subjects and in a way that's accessible and you can really understand and can raise some great questions. So I think we'll have a great discussion tonight, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you guys.
Thank you.
დამავიწყდა იმის ხსენება, რომ სინქრონული თარგმანი გვაქვს, დღეს ღონისძიება იქნება ინგლისურად. თუ გჭირდებათ თარგმანი, აიღეთ ყურსასმენები, რომლებიც უკან იპოვით. მადლობა.
Madloba Nuka. So, let me introduce the panelists. We have two writers here today. We're joined by Blake Crouch. Thank you, Chris, for introducing and, of course, supporting the festival. Thanks to the Writers' House. And some of you may know a lot about all the Blake Crouch. I think you all met some friends. And we are happy to have you here. And thanks, because it's a pandemic. And okay. And another writer we have here is Aza Koshkadze. Some of you also may know him because of his poetry and other things he's done in literature, in different forms, of course. And we'll just kick off with some questions, and hopefully you'll enjoy the talk. So, firstly, I want to I refer to Guardian one time mentioned you as your fiction as a quantum fiction that's delightfully unserious. And while I agree with this idea about your writing, I want to know how do you approach it? Because in a way, any writing is entertaining. For example, Kafka is entertaining, quite entertaining and funny for me. And could you touch this as a writer? How do you approach it to make it more entertaining? Because entertainment doesn't mean that we laugh. We just need to be, you know, like an escape from the reality or whatever. And also as a reader, what is entertainment in literature for you? And yeah, you too.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. This is our first trip abroad since the pandemic, and it's really exciting to be here in your beautiful city. I think the most important thing, first and foremost, for writing is entertainment. We have to entertain first. I want to talk about the deeper thoughts and those harder targets I aim at, but I look at my work as a way to take you out of your life. Whatever you're doing, you go to your work, you have your family, I want to sweep you away in my stories and make you forget everything for 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, however long it takes you to read a book of mine. So that's the first thing, because no matter how much you care about making someone think, if you're not entertaining them, you might as well be talking to a brick wall. So to entertain is the first thing. I started writing when I was really young. My first stories were told when I was about 12 years old to my 6-year-old brother. He wanted really scary bedtime stories. And so I started telling him this really scary story about a castle up on the hill, and there was a mad scientist that would come down and steal the children out of the neighborhood. And I was just trying to scare him so he would stop asking me to tell him stories. But he liked it so much, he would pull the covers over his head, and he would say, keep telling me these stories. And so it became this serialized tale that spanned months. And I got such a rush out of just telling him this story and having that audience reaction. And I think that's why I became a writer, because I wanted to have that on a larger scale. And it's something I've never lost, that passion for, I have a story I want to tell you, and I don't want to lose your attention even for a second.
Well, it's very interesting because is it the same being scared and being entertained?
Often, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think not every book or movie or anything we use as a consumer, we consume, are aimed to like entertain us. Not all the ideas from the books are that we like, you know. Sometimes they are terrible, but the form of storytelling is something that compels you take your time, and this is the part of entertainment, you know, not the conception, but the idea that someone tries to grab some of your time and get your attention. It's kind of, well, many people have that complex actually, and it's referred to the topic of science fiction and mainstream literature, for example, and so-called deep literature, which have like deeper philosophical premises, for example. But I think, well, that complex is like something that we need to just break up with. You know, entertaining is good. I mean,
thank you. Just to segue what you just described, I just wanted to ask you, both of you, what you wanted to write when you began writing, basically, because I can imagine that you had some ideas what the writing was for you, and what is it for you now, and what do you want to write now in the 2021 after everything that's happening, you know? Because you mentioned that, I have to quote you, it's from, I think, from the recursion. Life is nothing how he expected the character. It would be when he was young and living under the delusion that the things could be controlled. Nothing can be controlled, only endured. So maybe you endured some things during the life, and I know Koshka personally, so I know he endured some things. So what did you want to write about before, and what do you want to write about now?
I think we've all endured quite a lot since the pandemic hit. I think before, I don't know, I was writing about some pretty crazy ideas before the pandemic hit. And what really struck me living through it and being in lockdown and just having all of the things we take for granted taken away, which was that lack of control that we have and how close all of this really is to just slipping away, and how much worse it could be. I mean, as bad as things were in the worst moments, we all get to be here tonight, masked up unfortunately, but we get to be here and we get to talk about books and literature, and that's a beautiful thing. I think after coming out of this pandemic, I don't know yet, to be honest with you. I'm finishing my new book right now, and I started the book before the pandemic. That's how long it's been taking me. It's going to be forever thought. It's going to be my pandemic book. It's not about the pandemic, don't worry. It's about something much worse. I don't know. I don't want to write. I don't want to write about the pandemic. I don't want to write about it. I think that we all lived through it, and like I've been sent a bunch of. I get sent a lot of books to read before they're published and to maybe write a quote about if I like it. And I'm seeing a lot of books where writers are writing about, COVID. And I don't want to read those books. I lived through it. I want something new. I want something fresh. I want to understand what their mindset was and what they learned coming out of it, but I don't want it to have the trappings of any of that. I want to put it behind me.
Well, actually, I loved your answer because it is very predictable for science fiction writer to write about pandemic. Actually, a good science fiction writer won't write about pandemic because it was already written many times before, and that feeling about that we are coming to some kind of feeling of apocalypse or something like that, it was quite fast because really we overcome it actually. And but you mentioned that you were writing the book. You started you were preparing your pandemic book. Did it change something in your writing process, like in your plot or something?
Well, I threw the first 70,000 words of the book away a year ago because I think I don't know if it was the COVID of it all or what it was. I think it did have something to do with it, but I wasn't happy with what I'd done. I loved the idea, I loved the core concept, but I didn't like the way I had executed it. I didn't like the way I had chosen to go into that story, and so I threw it out. And it was a feeling of, and oddly, I threw it out when the first wave of COVID kind of went away. It was almost like I was, all right, well, I'm leaving that behind me now, and I'm going to go do something. I'm going to approach this from a different perspective. It's interesting, like there's a scene in Dark Matter when they're going through the multiverse where they come into this plague world, and that was written before the pandemic hit. And as we're writing, I'm adapting Dark Matter as a TV show. And we made the decision.
You yourself
I am
doing the
yes.
adaptation?
Yes.
Well, I had a question, but later.
So, but I was like, we're not going to include this world in the show. It's too close to what we've all lived, and I think I wrote it before the pandemic hit, and there's nothing I can do now to take it out of the book. But I don't want someone watching this show and then suddenly my characters are in this crazy plague world that is eerily similar to what we all just experienced, and having it take them out of the reading experience, because that's always the goal. I don't want to do anything that makes you stop turning the pages.
Well, the great answer, because my favorite genre, for example, is cyberpunk. But most of the science fiction don't think that it's science fiction writers don't think that it's anymore the science fiction, because it's becoming quite real, because we have the technologies in the pocket, not just inserted but in the pocket, but it does not make any difference because we have some AI, some virtual technologies, so it's not science fiction anymore. So I really understand what you're trying to say, that we need something new.
I don't even know what science fiction really is anymore, because we are living in the future now, and it's not the future that we all, I think, thought it would be. There's elements of our world that do feel incredibly like the future, like civilians. William Shatner, Captain Kirk, just took a rocket up to space. That's awesome. But we don't have coral reefs anymore, and there's so like for every beautiful shiny thing we have 4 other very dark problems that we can't bring ourselves to solve. And weirdly, that the future, as we read it in books, always felt like it was going to be this perfect, pristine landscape, but it's not.
Do you really have that feeling that there is no technologies which are not predictable? I mean, for example, there are some kind of technologies which even scientists can predict, but there are some. For example, Stanislav Lem is writing in his monography that there is, for example, internet. It was the technology absolutely unpredictable thing. No science fiction writer could just imagine that kind of thing, and virtual reality and so on and so on. But now there is no such thing. You can't imagine the technology which is like unpredictable. So it is very well. I am going back to the thing that you mentioned, that we can say what is science fiction now.
And we can say, but at the same time, it's a form that you write in. But your stories are quite personal. When I read Dark Matter and the Recursion, they are like some family dramas, and stories that are quite personal to many people. They're quite emotional. And Norm Macdonald just died, and I read his older interview, which was reshared now, and he said that for him the art was always concealing something. And one of my friends rephrased this idea from Heidegger that revealing is revealing by concealing, and concealing some things by revealing. So how do you use your genre to reveal things or maybe conceal them,
I love science fiction, and I read it pretty broadly, but I find more often than not it leaves me feeling cold, because the focus is more on the future, on the flashy, flying, whatever, the robots. It's not about like the characters at the heart of the story. And I couldn't tell you which book it was. Maybe it was, it might have been Wayward Pines. It was the first time I ever decided, all right, I'm going to just go out on a limb and write about characters who are going through some of the things that I'm going through, who are struggling with some of the things I'm struggling with. And I really did that with Dark Matter. When I was writing that book, I call it my divorce book. As I was writing that book, I was coming to the conclusion that my marriage at the time was coming to an end. And I stopped. At first, my instinct was to pull back from that and to not go there and to do something else. And I don't know why I decided to just go forward with it. But I wanted to write about a character who was also at a bit of a crossroads, who had gotten to a point far enough along in his life where he could look back and see all the different choices he'd made and how some of those paths might have taken him in different directions. In the book, not to spoil anything, but it ends well. My story, which is really Dark Matter story, didn't end well. It ended like many ends come in a divorce. But it was important for me to put that into that book, and it made that character really come alive. And it was the strangest thing. I didn't realize I was even writing about this at the end of my marriage until I was about halfway through the book. It was a very odd experience. It was almost like I was giving myself some sort of therapy through the writing process. And as I realized what I was doing, I knew how I wanted to end that book, and I knew that my end was going to be a little bit different. And it was a really powerful thing to say, hey, what if I use books not only to research things that I'm interested in, quantum mechanics, memory, genetic engineering, what if I also use books as a way of examining what I'm going through personally in a moment? And what if I can find a way to channel that through a character? So that is how the emotion, I think, comes out in my books.
And you mentioned this multiverse, how you flirt with the idea, of course, and a lot of people also do this in the TV or cinema or literature, It's a popular idea right now, and of course maybe in science circles, but in the literature and fiction as well. So, and you mentioned the therapy as well, because, anxiety is often the questions like what could be, and or if I did that, or if I done that, or, So does it give you like a freedom to explore more ideas about yourself, of course, and your characters, because it's a multiverse. Everything is possible, basically. So how does it work for you? And you'll touch it because he translated William Gibson's Neuromancer, so he's into cyberpunk, and of course.
I have another question about the same topic,
Yeah.
but just for that, and I will ask it.
So, yeah.
Go, please.
Oh, my question is actually like writer to writer. I'm actually very shy to be mentioned also writer together with you, because you have 12 books and I have a couple of stories published, thanks to Shota, who is sitting here, who published my couple of science fiction stories, and he's the editor of a very interesting periodics, like magazine, literary magazine. My question is, like writer to writer, what was the most difficult thing in building this multiverse story world? Because when I was reading your book, it was like all the time coming to my head the question, what was the difficult? Because I never tried that, because there are some, the difficult ideas writers trying to avoid, but you just so firmly did it.
Thank you. The most difficult part was honestly not making the multiverse sections longer. My first draft of Dark Matter was, I think, 110,000 words. So I cut 20,000 words, which is about 100 pages, between the first draft and the final book. I was so in love with the idea of the multiverse. I think the box in the corridor is so cool. I could spend the rest of my life writing a story about characters exploring worlds. And I tried to do that in the first draft, and I realized, as some of my editors, one of whom is here tonight, Jackie, pointed out, that's some boring shit after about 50 pages. It was becoming episodic instead of propulsive. So what I ended up doing was cutting a lot of the worlds away and trying to never lose sight of that. I kept asking myself, what does my main character want? He wants to get home to his family. What's stopping him? Well, this world's stopping him. Well, what in this world's stopping him? Okay, great. What does he learn from this world? Okay, he learns that. Now we go to the next world and we take what we've learned, and it's an escalation. It was honestly the hardest part of the book was that section, because it read too slowly for many, many drafts, and only in the final stages did I finally pare it down enough to where it kept the momentum of the beginning.
Actually, I wanted to tell you this, that there are writers who are writing about simple things, which is the hard reading, but you are writing very hard topics, easy reading, which is a compliment.
Thank you. That's the best compliment you could give.
Actually, you make people read any kind of complex world, and it's easy reading. It's like, it means that you are a person who knows how to build that. So tomorrow there is a master class by him, workshop, and if anyone is interested to master I know.
Their craft.
The how to craft.
Any craft.
In craft. Come over.
As we touched this topic of writing, basically, and you mentioned that you cut out 7,000 words from the current book and 20,000. 17.
A whole book.
Yeah, so it's a whole another novel. And in Georgia, I think that a lot of people don't have this creative writing background, or they just don't study how to write. And it's quite hard because the idea of professional writer is not established. I know that Koshka is a big fan of creative writing and just to approach the writing more systematically and like profoundly. And I wanted to talk about this importance of the creative writing, basically. And sometimes, of course, in Georgia, these kind of writers, they have the freedom to write in whatever style they like. It's not like it doesn't add up sometimes, so it's a hell of for an editor, for example. But but I met some of the publishers international book fairs, and they just sometimes when they present the books, when they present the background of the writer, they say that they studied the creative writing in Harvard or wherever, most of these books are, like written by the graphomans. They just enjoy to write. They can write because they have the social research behind them. They have the characters that are in demand and relatable, of course. But this is not genuine experience, and with you it's not like that because it's quite personal when you read your text, So I want to talk about this because I know Koshka will also talk about this. How do you approach it with the background of creative writing and how important it is to have it, and also just mix with your feelings and ideas?
I think there are creative writing programs in America that you can take, and there's a handful of them that are really, really good. Most of the people who I know who are very successful have never taken creative writing classes. I took a few classes at university that were really helpful and very positive experiences. I applied to get into some MFA programs in America and was rejected from them. The creative writing studying track is very different from what I do, because it sort of steers you towards publishing in academic short story journals and things like that. I don't think you need it to be a great writer. I think what you need to be a great writer is the conviction that you have an amazing story to tell, and the vulnerability to share that story with other people and listen when they tell you it's great or if it sucks, and learn how to take that feedback. That's the learning of writing. You can only really do it yourself.
Yes, you're right. You don't need a creative writing course, creative writing studies if you want to become a great writer. But if you want to become a good writer, yes, you need it.
If you want to teach writing, you should definitely go to a creative writing school. If you want to be a writer, you should write.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that there's a big difference between great writer and a good writer. If you want to become a good writer, you need some class. But if you want to become a great writer, no classes can help you. Just you need to do it yourself.
Yeah, reading as much as you can possibly read, and I've learned more from my friends who are writers than I've learned from teachers.
Some of the best editors I've met, they always advise young writers to read quality fiction in their native language and the quality translations, just to up their game. And also, we know that these great filmmakers also advise this young generation to just not to be attached to the film schools, and because they may sometimes ruin you, basically.
Right. Oh, it's true. It's not to say that there's nothing to be gained, but it's not a necessary step towards becoming a writer, is all I'm saying.
Thanks. I'm just switching it on and off. So, I also wanted to ask, because you mentioned these adaptations of Dark Matter. Of course, Wayward Pines was this trilogy which was adapted into TV series. And of course, you were involved in the script writing and also producing, right? you have to visualize as well. And I also wanted to ask you about this. Of course, you have the influences from the famous writers and everything, but also I was wondering what are some of the visual references you use, maybe from the cinema or art, or from all internet, maybe, the visual references for you when you're writing, or maybe when you're just script writing.
Interesting. I don't know. That's a really fascinating question. I don't know that I think about specific directors or movies as visual references when I'm writing a book. I just sort of see the scene in my head as it unfolds. But when I finish and I look back, I think I'm very inspired by the way David Lynch sets scenes and the way he does tension. I think I'm very inspired by the way the Coen brothers, like Fargo, No Country for Old Men, the way they do landscape, if that makes sense. The way they create tension in scenes and just ratchet it up to unbearable levels. Yeah. Those are the first two that come to mind. Hitchcock is a big one. Yeah.
Well, sorry. The interesting question about this is that you are adapting yourself, your writing from the fiction into the screenplay. It's quite difficult because I have some experiences of that. Were you flexible to the producers because I imagine the American producers have absolutely different ideas about, for example, your writings or others' writings, and the writers are not always flexible to see the same way they're writing on the screen. Did you have any conflicts with them?
They try to butcher your work,
Because sorry, I want to concrete because adapting others' writings is easier, of course, but adapting your writing for the screen is quite difficult.
Yeah.
So
it is. The trick is to partner with really smart people who you respect and who are even smarter than you are when it comes to the medium of cinema. And if you do that, then what they bring is they see things. They just see a different shade than you see, and it's additive instead of taking away from my vision. I haven't had major conflicts, like for instance on Dark Matter, and we're not in production yet. We're writing scripts. We're writing scripts for the season, but I'm working with these people because they have the incredible passion for the book. We all want to tell the same story. The best way, and I believe the best idea wins.
But sorry, but they are right. You together are trying to adapt this into the screens, of course. But is there anything you're writing dialogues also?
I'm sorry.
Dialogues. You're writing yourself those dialogues? Is there things you're removing yourself?
Oh yeah.
That's like you're planning
for sure.
your own writing.
I don't want to adapt everything I've written for film and TV.
It's the most difficult thing in the story.
I want to adapt. Yeah, I want to adapt the things I have a vision for, and I see Dark Matter very clearly. And the reason I decided to do it was, most of this stuff is figured out. Why would I just hand this off to someone else and let them make something genius? Like, the hard work has been done. It's all about just paring it down into scenes and making these scenes. Oh, we have a cat.
Yeah, we have another moderator here. I have one question. You're working on a Dark Matter adaptation now, right? Mm-hmm. How many drafts you've written so far?
Yeah, well, it's going to be probably an 8 or 9 episode series.
Oh, it's a series, but
started out as a movie, and after several years of realizing this is the wrong format for it, a movie was taking all of the magic out of the idea. The movie was just like taking the soul out of it. So we moved it over to television, where it can actually breathe and it can be a true adaptation of the book instead of this truncated, condensed, monstrous thing.
Okay. So they changed the format. I mean, in Georgia, it's very difficult to find someone who had something written and is so much flexible to that, you know, because I have that argument that we are small market, and we don't really care about the, you know, selling as much, because you can become, the rich out of writing. So we write more freely. I mean, well, it works another way.
I think we have a member of a panel here.
Another question
Next question, maybe?
from the cat?
Her question is meow.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about this. You know, you mentioned William Shatner going to space, and in recursion you have this billionaire characters paid, and next question. And of course, now we see these egomaniacs like these billionaires going to space, and probably in '60s when this was like the space race, basically, it probably influenced a lot of writers. And I was wondering what you think that would this current space race, influence new generation of writers, or maybe current writers, maybe yourself, and how it will just influence basically writing currently?
I don't know. I think it remains to be seen. Right now, it seems very experimental. It seems like it's a very sort of elite endeavor, and yeah.
I think she loves you.
I don't know. I think it'll get interesting if we get to Mars. I mean, we've been to space. We've been to the moon. It feels like we've done these things before. I think we're going to need to get out beyond our Earth orbit for me to feel like real enthusiasm about,
we're going to need a bigger boat.
We're going to need a bigger boat. Yes.
Thanks. And another question, just about the writing. And I was wondering, for some writers, writing process is liberating, whatever it means for them. And does the writing liberate you, or maybe, and also, how does the genre liberate you? Because, as I said, when I read The Dark Matter, I don't perceive it like a science fiction novel, because it was much more than that. And how much freedom does the writing give you, and the genre also?
I don't know how liberating the act of writing is. It's hard. Yeah. It's very hard, and it's very difficult, and it's really frustrating. It's like 70% really frustrating, but 30% just complete euphoria when you have those breakthroughs, when suddenly a character clicks. Like when you write a character, like my characters are always very thin in the first few drafts, and I used to get really frustrated with myself. I was like, why don't I know them better sooner? And I realized it's because, these characters are just like people in real life. You meet someone one time over a drink or whatever, you might get a sense of them, but you actually have to keep that relationship warm. You have to keep going back and back before you get the full sense of who they are. And for whatever reason, that takes me about 4 drafts of a book before I fully understand this character and I can see them like I would see a real person. So that can be a very frustrating, protracted experience, but it's the breakthroughs are so extraordinary, and when it's clicking along, there's nothing like it. That's the high as a writer that I am chasing. I want to get to that place. Somebody said writing is terrible. What you want to do is have written. It's really great to have written a book. I love to have written Dark Matter. Writing it was terrible. To have written it is great. So that I try to remind myself that during the hard times.
But not waking up and I have something to write. The whole book in ahead. Very interesting. Well, reading your book is like playing a game, I think, because you are following the entangled type of plot, Why? For example, there is do you know who is John Truby? John Truby? That's a guy who wrote the anatomy of the story, and he kind of criticizes the guy, the director who is Interstellar.
Christopher Nolan. Oh, Christopher Nolan. Yeah.
Yeah, he's criticizing him because of over-plotting. I mean, there are too much plots. It's like, but of course, the audience don't care about it because they love it. I mean, this is a kind of, I think you're kind of that kind of writer, like, well, Interstellar is...
Nolan.
Chris Nolan, okay. You're kind of that kind of writer because you kind of invite us in a play because we are going to, because you grab all our attention, you know. It's like we need to be involved fully in the book to disentangle that story. Why did you choose that kind of? Because it's not easy. Because it's risky. Because it's you know. Do you enjoy this? Do you play with those?
I do. I mean, I write the books that I wish already existed. So when I'm coming up with an idea, the pressure check for me, the bar is, if I were reading this book, if I were watching this movie, is this an idea that would completely capture me? And if it does, then I'll keep with the idea. And if it doesn't, I'll push it aside. And I'm very, very hard on ideas. I date a lot of ideas before I decide to get married to one.
You said it's quite laborious process, of course. It's not like something to enjoy, of course. But how do you feel after it's done? Of course, you feel like something left you, and it's out there, already in the world. But how do you approach the next couple of weeks or months? You know, how do you feel the emptiness? How does the ideas? How do you refill yourself too? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a moment after it's truly finished, and that moment is when the book goes off to copy editing. That's when it's out of my hands. That means I only have to look to see, you know, did they find some periods and commas that I missed? And it's a moment of like incredible elation, but yeah, then there's an emptiness that comes right after it. I have always wanted to be one of those writers who already knows exactly what their next book is going to be before they finish their current one, but I've never been able to do that. And so there's always this period that sometimes it's, you know, several months, sometimes longer, where I don't know what my next idea is going to be. And I'm sort of stumbling around almost blind looking for that piece of inspiration that's going to make me want to do this crazy process again. It's interesting that you brought that up, that it is an emptiness. It's a restlessness. Yeah, but it's also a release. I'm sorry?
How many drafts you write for each?
Probably 10.
I'm asking because I'm very lazy.
10 drafts.
10 drafts. At ჯერ გადაწერს ხოლმე თავის რომანს.
And the first like 4 are very big changes from draft to draft. Like, I mean, from the first draft to the second, I might throw the book away or throw out the last half or throw out the third act. And with each subsequent draft, the changes get smaller and smaller and smaller until then I'm finally just tinkering with it and changing a sentence here, a word there.
Thank you.
You start, I think it's in the recursion, you quote like a Nabokov that time is but memory in the making. So the memory is of course really important in that book, but overall the time and the memory and just if we just perceive it as in the one place, you know, in the present, or maybe it's happening all the time. So what does time mean to your writing? It means a lot, obviously, but from your personal experience, from the real life, and what is the time for you, basically?
I mean, I think time is the most interesting concept of all. It's something that we're like prisoners to it. But it's something we also don't understand, and we all experience it, but we all experience it just a little bit differently. One of the most interesting things I learned writing recursion is that we all live in memory. We don't ever experience the present moment. Even as we're all sitting here in this room and I'm talking to you, you're not hearing what I'm saying as I'm saying it. There is a delay. It's a small delay. But it is a delay. It's milliseconds. But that means that your brain is processing all of this in its working memory. You're just living in memory. We're all remembering this moment. We're not living it.
Something to add?
No.
Okay.
Well, actually, memory is the most complex thing in the universe, as scientists also admire it, so, confess it. So it's always interesting. It reminds me my favorite writer, Philip K. Dick, who has that kind of topic. Always just you never know what is reality, what is your thoughts, and what are your thoughts, and what is the reality, and there is no the border between that. So very interesting.
To get back to genre, because it's all the late session for our audience. The science fiction in Georgia, it was like probably it was 100 years ago. There were like some notions of it. We had in the Soviet era, of course, science fiction was huge in Soviet era. So we had some writers trying to do some of it, but it wasn't huge. In the 90s, we had some struggles with that. And now a couple of young writers are trying to do that, and Koshka is also one of the biggest promoters of the genre, just always attending international events and everything. But it's still new, and I don't know if we have some of them in the audience, but what would be your recommendation to the writer who is just stepping into the genre, because of course the research is a huge part of it, and it's probably like taking a lot of time,
Great question.
But how to approach the genre, basically, because some people may be because nowadays in the cinema, some people just are trying to do a little bit of everything, science fiction. Chloe Zhao, he directed a movie with Frances McDormand, and now she's doing a Marvel movie, and why not, right? But at the same time, it's if you are doing like a classical fiction, like just highly literary or maybe just commercial fiction, but how do you enter the genre?
Well, if you're going to be successful, you're going to have to figure it out for yourself first. But I also think that science fiction now is different than what it was when, like, Bradbury and Clarke and Ursula Le Guin were writing, because, again, there's the feeling of we are in the future now. So are you writing about a utopia or a terrible dystopia, or are you writing to actually reflect the world that we're in right now? I think writing to accurately reflect the world we're in is a very noble ambition, because it's so complex. The future is here, and it doesn't feel like the future. It just feels like our lives, but it is the future, and it's very uneven. And there's moments of real hope and optimism, but also moments of real, why can't we just solve these problems if we can go to space? Why do people have to starve to death still? And those disparities, to me, are what's really fascinating about science fiction. And that's where I would be pointing my camera if I were just stepping into the stage.
Yeah, absolutely agree, because future is here. Because if any one of you remembers, there's a Blade Runner movie, the old one by Ridley Scott, and when there's the title 2019. Now we are 2 years later than Blade Runner Future. It's quite crazy, because, for example, in the 60s, Philip K. Dick was imagining absolutely different things about 2019, and we are now 2 years later than that. Of course, we are in the future now. That's absolutely right.
Also, some of the questions for the fans. If you could name some of the writers, not necessarily science fiction writers, but other than science fiction, that they influenced you? Because you might name some of the names that we could be surprised, because when you think of the science fiction writer, you think of all the greats you just mentioned. And who were some of them who were like a genre writers, but heavily influenced you in the writing? And
yeah, not a lot of pure science fiction writers. Tolkien, Madeleine L'Engle, C.S. Lewis, Cormac McCarthy, Pat Conroy, a Southern writer. I don't know how much he's translated over here. Those would be, I would say, my big five. And the thriller writer Thomas Harris, who did Silence of the Lambs. He was a big impact on me.
Yeah, that's a horror, right?
Translator of the book right there. in Georgia, yeah. Nika translated.
No kidding.
Yeah.
We'll talk.
Oh, that's a masterpiece.
Also Tolkien, and also a lot of other great stuff. So.
Oh, Nika, yeah.
Shout out to Nika.
So I want to go back to the previous question. Actually, he asked about the science fiction genre specifically. I understand now it's commercial work, and in the US that is very famous, but not in Europe. But in Georgia, for example, some of the writers have these complexes that they think they need to. Like they think there is not possible to write something deep in the genres, which is of course wrong, because all the writing started as a fairy tales and they were quite deep.
Yeah. You have to trick, like the genre is just a good way of tricking people into reading what you have written. If you don't, that's how I look at it. Like the genre is just a useful tool to help people get comfortable with reading your book. That's how I think of it.
Yes, I hate that obsession about being quite real and quite close to reality, because it's not the like get up. It's like it's still fiction. Whatever you try to how it doesn't matter how much you try to make it close to the reality, it still stays the fiction. You have to make some frames, time frames, so write in genres.
Yeah, I'm out of the questions, I have more questions, but everybody's tired. But maybe the audience has some questions. Everybody is welcome to ask whatever they like.
What's your favorite science fiction book?
What is my favorite science fiction book?
One book.
One book.
Yeah.
And not yours.
That is
not yours.
That is really tough. I don't know. I love A Wrinkle in Time. I don't even know if you would say it's science fiction, but it was such a big impact on me when I read it as a kid.
Did you like the adaptation?
No.
It was a rhetorical question, basically. But of course, you had this TV series, and you have TV series coming. But initially, were you open to doing this, adapting your work? Because some writers are reluctant to do that. Some of them are open to. Of course, it's a lot of money, but at the same time, you are also involved in that. And how do you imagine initially? How would it be like? Because sometimes some writers, which they write their fiction, it's really cinematic, when you read it. And do you have this in mind when you're writing?
I do sometimes. I do it because I love the screenwriting format. I think it's such a pure format, and I just enjoy the scene construction. I like how it strips it down even. My writing tends to be really stripped down, and screenwriting strips it down even more to the bare essentials, and I think that's what the appeal is to me.
But in books, you can write in first person, and you hear the thoughts of the main character. But how do you manage without it the screenwriting?
You have to write around it. You have to
show it.
You have to show it.
More questions?
do the opinions of the readers and critics influence you? I mean, which is more important for you, to enjoy it yourself or to make someone else to enjoy it?
Do I let critics influence me?
Yeah.
I tend to read reviews when they first start coming out for a book. Like I'll read the first few just to get a sense, and then I'll stop. I don't think that I do let them influence me. My critics are my editors, my inner circle of writers. Those are my critics. Those are the ones I listen to. It doesn't really do me any good to read a bunch of stuff about my work after the fact. There's nothing I can do about it. Maybe I could apply it to the next book, but I trust the people who I have around me and who are giving me feedback, and it works for me, and it's a very good process, and it helps me get to the best possible book. So I hope for good reviews. I don't always get them, but I don't let it get in my head.
What do you think makes your book best-selling?
I think
a couple, right?
A
couple.
What makes a book best-selling?
Your book.
Selling a lot of copy. No. I don't know. I think it's a bit elusive. I mean, what makes the first book someone writes a bestseller is because once you've had a bestseller, it's a bit easier to people know about you, and you don't have to educate everyone on what you're doing. What makes the first book a bestseller is tricky. I don't know. It's very elusive.
So I just wanted to ask, you said you do 10 drafts and that you work with the editor. What is the role of the editor in doing that? And do they sometimes, and that the first draft is sometimes thin, the characters are thin. So is it a push-pull process? Do you fight over it? Or what is the role of the editor in getting you from the first draft to the final product?
There's sort of a new window into the book for me, because after you have written so many drafts, I start to lose objectivity. I sort of can't see the forest for the trees anymore. But when I hand it over to someone I trust to read it, I kind of see it through their eyes again. It allows me to see it fresh. And I don't always agree with what they say, but I mean, I like my book I'm working on now, I think 10 or 12 people have read it or are reading it. And I will send a book, I'll just get this weird sense at various stages through the writing process that, like, for whatever reason, I think this person could help me. I think that I'm at a place where I could use their feedback on this thing. I have friends who are so good on character, and I know that if I send them the book when I'm struggling, they're gonna put their finger on exactly what I'm doing wrong with these characters and kind of maybe show me the way forward. I have other friends who I know if, like, my third act isn't really as powerful as it should be, I know they're gonna give me the truth, and they might even have an idea about how to make it bigger, about how to land the plane.
It's a great experience because sometimes in Georgia, we have a problem with critique, basically. We wish that we had a lot of critics, Basically, it's a positive feedback people get, so it doesn't reflect into the quality writing mostly. Yeah, just a comment.
Well, for example, for me,
what is
Can you start over?
what to research when you write some text, and what is important in your life when you write?
What is important in my life to help me write, and like
It's important when you write in your life.
I think what's important is doing it every day, is writing every single day. There are moments where I might not write for a week or two, if I'm stuck on a plot point or I don't know, or I'm struggling with a character. But when it's going well, the important thing is to write every day and to keep that momentum going and to give myself that sense of making progress, because it's very easy to, it's easy to get demoralized.
So do you write every day, you mean? No. How often?
I write every day when it's going well, and when I'm not writing, it's because I've hit a wall on something and I have to just take a break and I have to take a step back and try to reevaluate and figure out what went wrong.
So you have a regime, your particular regime, yeah.
I try to do like 1,000 words a day. If I can hit 1,000 words a day, that's very good progress.
It's about 2 pages. It's cool. It's a fast.
Please.
So, in your book, Dark Matter, the source states have a really big part. Like the main character's thoughts are really big on source days. Is there any personal reason you chose that day, or you were just like source days are interesting?
Thursday is my favorite day.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Okay.
You said it's not in production yet, but do you know the casts for the TV show? Or
I don't know
who
yet.
Who do you want to play?
I don't know yet. We're just about to start that process, but hopefully early next year we'll be able to announce the cast.
So it means it's confidential?
We truly haven't gone to cast yet. Yeah, but if we had, it would be confidential.
You have some preferences? What do you want?
I can't say because
your
they're
book.
probably not available, and then whoever we do end up getting will get their feelings hurt.
Many NDAs.
Because actors.
Okay.
Many NDAs will be signed.
Be careful about the prop guns because of those tragedy.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Koshka. Yeah, that was it, basically.
Thank you all.
Enjoy it.
Hello, bye.